renewed fears that the president is asserting an expansive vision of presidential power. In a new interview about the Iran war, Trump claimed that his power as president is unlimited. Take a listen.
What have you learned about not just the exercise of power, but the limits on your power as a result of the conflict?
There are no limits.
No limit.
No, not. I haven't learned that lesson yet. I know there are, but, there are no limits.
Now, that is an obviously false assertion. Not only does the Constitution of the United States limit presidential power, the courts and Congress are increasingly enforcing those limits against this president. But it may be that pushback that is in fact fueling the president's thirst for unprecedented power. Today, the Wall Street Journal reported that Trump has recently been rejecting advice from aides and lawmakers, telling them, quote, "I'm the president and you're not." In a new book, the New York Times reporters Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan reveal that Trump once compared himself to a series of powerful figures from history. According to the report, he rattled off names: Napoleon, Hitler, Mao, Stalin. Those leaders, Mr. Trump said, maintained power through fear. Trump then reportedly posed what observers took to be a rhetorical question, musing, quote, "Who would ever do a thing like that, right?" According to the Times, following a June 2025 strike on a nuclear enrichment site in Iran, the president crowed that the strike had completely, quote, "obliterated" Iran's nuclear capabilities. When Vice President J.D. Vance proposed describing the strike in more muted terms, the president was not happy. Quote, Trump told one associate, "Everyone needs to say effing obliterated. That's the word. Everyone just needs to copy what I say. Obliterated, obliterated." When, in an interview, Vance failed to use the word obliterated, Trump reportedly grew angry. Vance then changed his tune. Check out these two interviews just one day apart.
Have those facilities been obliterated?
Well, John, severely damaged versus obliterated, I'm not exactly sure what the difference is. What we know is that their nuclear program back substantially. We have obliterated the Iranian nuclear program, obliterated the Iranian nuclear program. Their nuclear program has been obliterated, as I said before. That is the obliteration of their nuclear program, which is why the president, I think, rightly is using that term.
Seems like he got on message. And that's where we start tonight. Trump is on the defense over Iran. He is plunging in the polls, and he is fuming, grasping for power at a time when it appears to be slipping away. Joining me now to discuss is Tara Palmieri, longtime journalist, formerly with Politico, and host of the Tara Palmieri Show, and author of the Red Letter Substack. Tara, the president is claiming unlimited power. This is not the first time he's offered a muscular vision of presidential power, but what do you make of this claim in this moment?
Clearly, he doesn't understand his role as a civil servant, right? And I think, if anything, we saw the extent of his power with the war in Iran and the fact that he was not able to get the outcome that he would have wanted. I mean, 2 of the 14 points in that deal are actually in favor of the United States, and they barely are. He's clearly in legacy mode right now. He's not concerned about his own party. He doesn't really care what happens in the midterms, even though there's a threat of impeachment, I guess another impeachment. So to him, he probably just thinks it's not a real exercise in holding his power to account because the last few have been unsuccessful. But I think what you're seeing is that the Republicans in Congress, especially those who have been defeated because he backed challengers in their primaries, they don't really care anymore. I mean, they're in a YOLO phase, you could say, and they're willing to defy his leadership. Also, he is a lame duck president. And so whether he likes it or not, these people, they don't need him anymore. So who knows?
Well, Tara, it's a great point. He's a lame duck president, perhaps focused on legacy, but he's also seeming to move into a new phase. Like, what do you make of him telling aides and lawmakers that I'm the president and you're not? I mean, is that about legacy or is it about something else?
I think Trump has always been this way. He's always been indignant. He's never really valued anyone else's opinion unless he's pitting people against each other and he enjoys watching the fight. He's always seen his staff as purely staff. He thinks he is the smartest person in the room. I think that's pretty clear. But I think as he gets older, as we've seen, people tend to become, as they say, more set in their ways, right? And you're probably seeing a manifestation of that with arguably the most powerful man in the world. And he's obviously high on that power right now, as you can see.
Is this a dangerous moment for the country, certainly in global affairs, but even domestically? We have a president who's comparing himself to Mao, Hitler, and Stalin. These are famous autocrats. At a time when democratic institutions seem to be fragile, should we be worried about the president comparing himself to these figures and asserting this very muscular vision of executive power?
I mean, power that's unchecked is absolutely an issue, especially in a democratic system. We hope that the processes, the checks and balances will actually check his power. I mean, hopefully Congress now will, the Republican members will see less of a threat to their position. I mean, they've been pretty much cowards until this point, but some of them no longer, needing to keep him on their good side. They might just side with Democrats. We'll have to see what happens. But these are his final years. We've only got 2 more years, right? I know there's a lot of talk about whether he'll actually allow for a transition of power afterwards, but I would think that his Republican colleagues would make that less likely. This is, and then he has J.D. Vance, who he clearly feels some sort of competition with already because he is positioning himself as the heir apparent. And J.D. is thinking about his own political future, as we can see in his positioning around the war in Iran. I think it's quite interesting that they would call it the Vance peace plan. I mean, have any of our peace plans with Iran actually worked? No. So you're basically handing him a failing plan, essentially.
Tara, I want to bring into the conversation Margaret Carlson. Margaret Carlson is a longtime journalist and editor-at-large for Semafor. Margaret, we've been talking about the president in legacy mode. Tara just brought up the really tantalizing prospect of the president perhaps locked in some kind of power struggle with his heir apparent, J.D. Vance. Is that how you're reading this development with the Iran deal and Vance's apparent ownership of that deal, despite its many problems?
Right. Tara was talking about the struggle with Congress and now the struggle with J.D. Vance, which has been going on for a while. And it's a triumvirate with Marco Rubio. And Marco Rubio is the more serious, popular contender, I think, among the party in general. But Vance has, I think, the president's ear. And Vance is very diplomatic, where he manages somehow not to agree with Trump on Iran, but back him publicly on even this awful, awful deal that has nothing going for it. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, the Senate, which always goes along with Trump up until now, I hear some spines growing. Even Senator Roger Wicker, the principled conservative from Mississippi, who's nonetheless held his tongue mostly up until now, disagreed and said about this memorandum that Trump is getting nothing with this plan that he got into the war to get. Now, that's a pretty stunning pronouncement from a very loyal, old chair of the Armed Services Committee senator.
So with that in mind, Margaret, I mean, is this simply about discontent over the Iran deal, which doesn't seem to be going in the favor of this country, but seems to be accruing to Iran's favor? Or is this also about the domestic climate, where it seems that polling says that Americans are souring on Trump's agenda writ large? Like, there's just not a lot of support for this. Is that why the Senate is growing a spine? Is that why J.D. Vance feels more authorized to disagree with this president, sometimes publicly?
When things begin to go wrong, sometimes this tipping point, the dominoes start to fall. And so you're seeing Trump in trouble on a number of fronts. He really enraged the Senate when he decided to keep Pulte in place instead of bringing in a somewhat normal intelligence chief. And then he didn't want to get rid of him until he fired the people that he resented and didn't like and no longer wanted there at the agency. And so then the Senate, until the Senate passed a bill he wanted that's very unpopular and that Senator Thune can't get the votes for. So now that's stymied, and there's really no winner here. It's a terrible situation. But Trump seems dug in again, but he's not going to win this one because there aren't the votes in the Senate. And there are just any number of things where, Trump now has those senators that lost their races simply because he backed their opponents speaking out against him. Bill Cassidy, very popular senator, a doctor who voted for Kennedy against his principles in order to please Trump. There's no pleasing Trump, and now that's apparent. You can see that in so many different ways in which Trump's reacted lately. You can't do enough for Trump. He will turn on you at the slightest, the slightest infraction against him. So I think there's a wave building here. And this memorandum, which gets us nothing, we stay in the hole, is the turning point.